A federal law aimed at protecting the remains and sacred objects of Native Americans has been in effect now for 30 years. And while it's proven helpful, Oklahoma tribes face the complicated challenge of what to do with bones and artifacts once they've been recovered. ONR's Alisa Hines explains.
It's old and considered an artifact, so it belongs in a museum, right? Or does it? Kelly Mosteller is the director of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation Cultural Heritage Center and says not everything should be in a museum.
Putting things in a museum is not always the way to be the most respectful. And for so long, universities and museums have seen themselves as sort of these gatekeepers, and that what they're doing is keeping these things safe. And they're putting them on display so that people can learn from them. But the question was rarely asked, do we have the right to do that?
Mosteller is also the Nagpra officer for the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Nagpra, aka Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, is a law that states any agency, museum, or university receiving federal funds must find anything in their collections that is tribal related and return them to the tribes. Mosteller says it's not always an easy task.
They were going to learn all of these things about these communities, but what they were doing was taking our ancestors who had been buried with great ceremony and with great love, and they were removing them from the ground, and they were looking at them under microscopes, and they were doing DNA testing, and they were putting them in boxes on shelves and leaving them for decades upon decades upon decades, and disturbing our archaeological sites, sacred sites. Beyond archaeology, you also had anthropologists who were going out into these communities and collecting, that's the term that they would be using, things like ceremonial items like maybe pipes or drums or masks or other items that would have been really critical to the community to keep certain ceremonies going.
Once returned to a tribe, the bones and/or objects are reburied. It's a painstaking process that is beginning to see results. But part of the problem is most tribes were removed from their ancestral lands in the 1830s and 40s.
Removal is a big hurdle that a lot of us have to deal with. So as a Great Lakes tribe, but as a removed tribe, whenever I go back to the Great Lakes region to do consultation, I know it doesn't usually make sense for me to ever take the lead because we were removed. We don't have land in the Great Lakes to return these ancestors to work to get them back as close as possible to the place where they were removed from the ground. So for us as removed tribes here in Oklahoma, many of us face that hurdle of not only going through the emotional work of trying to figure out, what needs to be done for these ancestors, what are the best steps to take, but also figuring out the logistics of, is it better to partner with a tribe that wasn't removed, that still has land there? Do we need to partner with a national park that will set aside a few acres of land that will be protected?
And Mosteller says while Nagpra is important to tribes, it's also important to non-natives.
It's bringing, I think, social consciousness into a modern era to look back at the things that we have always thought was just the way archaeology worked, the way museums worked. So I really do think that Nagpra is important on the ground to get these objects back where they belong, but it's also really important for the public to understand because it makes us stop and question. And we need to do that. We need to be a socially conscious museum-going community, and as museum professionals, we need to ask these questions. The very first thing we ask is not, can we, but should we?
A good question to ask before items are removed from any burial site. For the Oklahoma News Report, I'm Alisa Hines.